The gunshots echoed through the quiet courthouse, shattering the calm of an otherwise ordinary afternoon. Judge Kevin Mullins, a respected figure in Letcher County, Kentucky, slumped in his chair, blood pooling beneath him. Standing over him was Mickey Stine, the county's top cop, a man who had once called Mullins a friend. The surveillance camera in the judge's chambers captured it all. Stine's calm demeanor as he pulled the trigger, the shocked faces of those who rushed out of the room, and the chilling aftermath of a friendship turned deadly. But what could drive a man to kill his longtime friend in cold blood? The answer lies in a web of secrets, betrayal, and a mind pushed to the brink. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more gripping tales like this one. Thank you in advance for helping us grow. It all began on a seemingly normal day in September. The Letcher County Courthouse buzzed with its usual activity. Lawyers shuffling papers, defendants nervously awaiting their hearings, and Judge Kevin Mullins presiding over cases with his trademark calm authority. Mickey Stine, the county sheriff, was a familiar face in the courthouse. He and Mullins had known each other for years, their bond forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. They often had lunch together, a tradition they maintained even as their careers took them in different directions. But on this particular day, something was off. Surveillance footage from the courthouse shows Stine pacing nervously outside Mullins' chambers. He steps inside where Mullins is seated, relaxed, smoking a cigarette. A pastor and another man are also present, chatting casually. The camera doesn't capture audio, but the body language tells a story. Stine sits across from Mullins, his posture tense, his hands fidgeting. The group talks for several minutes, the atmosphere seemingly normal. Then, at 12:07 p.m., Stine abruptly stands and walks out. Mullins says something and Stine pauses, but only for a moment before continuing out the door. Outside the courthouse, Stine is seen walking away, his steps hurried. He returns briefly, only to leave again. By 1:16 p.m., he's back, walking toward the courthouse with a determined stride. What was going through his mind during that walk? What had changed between him and Mullins in those few hours? The answer may lie in a deposition Stine had given just days before. Sabrina Atkins, a woman arrested on drug charges in 2021, had filed a civil suit against the county. She claimed that a deputy, Ben Fields, had coerced her into sex in exchange for help with her ankle monitor. But her allegations didn't stop there. She told investigators that Fields wasn't the only one engaging in inappropriate behavior in the courthouse. She claimed to have seen a video of Judge Mullins having sex with a woman in his chambers. The implications were explosive, and Stine, as the county sheriff, was deeply involved in the investigation. The deposition had clearly shaken Stine. Friends and colleagues later described him as paranoid, sleepless, and not himself in the days leading up to the shooting. He seemed consumed by fear, though for what no one could say. Was it the weight of the secrets he carried? Or was there something more sinister at play? By 3 p.m., Stine was back in Mullins' chambers. The surveillance footage shows him making a phone call, first from his own phone, then from Mullins. The conversation is brief, but whatever is said, it's enough to push Stine over the edge. He pulls out a gun and fires several shots at Mullins, the man he once called a friend. The room erupts into chaos as people scramble to escape. Stine is later seen being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of fear and confusion. As the investigation unfolds, more questions arise. What did Mullins say to Stine in those final moments? What secrets were they hiding? And what drove a man like Mickey Stine to commit such a heinous act? The answers lie in a tangled web of power, corruption, and a mind pushed to its limits. But this is only the beginning. As we delve deeper into the case, the twists and turns will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we uncover the shocking details of the deposition, the secrets hidden in the judge's chambers, and the events that led to that fateful day. The courtroom was silent as Sabrina Atkins took the stand. Her testimony would unravel a scandal that had been buried deep within the walls of the Letcher County Courthouse. She spoke of a deputy, Ben Fields, who had promised her freedom in exchange for sex. But her story didn't end there. She claimed that Fields wasn't the only one abusing his power. Judge Kevin Mullins, she said, was also involved. Atkins described a video she had seen, a video that showed Mullins engaging in sexual acts with a woman in his own chambers. The room buzzed with shock and disbelief. How could a respected judge be involved in something so vile? Mickey Stines sat in the courtroom that day, listening intently. As the county sheriff, he had been tasked with investigating the allegations. But what he uncovered would haunt him. The deposition revealed a dark underbelly of corruption, one that implicated not just Fields and Mullins, but others in positions of power. Stine had always prided himself on being a man of integrity, but now he found himself caught in a web of lies and deceit. In the days following the deposition, Stine's behavior changed dramatically. Friends and colleagues noticed that he was on edge, his usual calm demeanor replaced by paranoia and agitation. He barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had learned. He confided in a few trusted individuals, expressing fear for his family. "They're trying to kidnap my wife and kid," he told one officer. But who was they? And why did Stine believe his family was in danger? The answer may lie in the events leading up to the shooting. On the morning of September 19th, Stine arrived at the courthouse as usual. Surveillance footage shows him pacing outside Mullins' chambers, his face etched with worry. He steps inside where Mullins is seated, relaxed and smoking a cigarette. The two men talk, their conversation calm at first. But something changes. Stine's body language becomes tense, his hands clenched into fists. He stands abruptly and walks out, only to return later that afternoon. What happened in those final moments? What did Mullins say to Stine that pushed him over the edge? The surveillance footage doesn't capture audio, but Stine's lawyers claim that their client was in the grip of extreme emotional disturbance. They argue that Stine believed his family was in imminent danger, and that he acted out of fear and desperation. But was it really that simple? Or was there more to the story? As the investigation continues, more details emerge. The video Atkins described, the one that allegedly showed Mullins engaging in sexual acts, has yet to be found. But investigators believe it exists, and they're determined to uncover the truth. They also discover that the surveillance camera in Mullins' chambers was installed after the allegations against Fields came to light. Was it a coincidence? Or was it an attempt to cover up what was really going on? Stine's lawyers are preparing to argue that their client was insane at the time of the shooting. They plan to present expert testimony to support their claim, but the prosecution is skeptical. They argue that Stine knew exactly what he was doing, and that his actions were premeditated. The stage is set for a dramatic courtroom battle, one that will delve into the darkest corners of the human mind. But as the trial approaches, questions remain. What secrets were hidden in the judge's chambers? Who else was involved in the scandal? And what drove Mickey Stine to commit such a heinous act? The answers lie in the twists and turns of a case that has shocked a small town to its core. The day of the shooting replayed in the minds of everyone who had been in the courthouse. The surveillance footage became the centerpiece of the investigation, a silent witness to the tragedy that unfolded. But the footage only told part of the story. The real drama lay in the moments that weren't captured on camera, the conversations, the threats, the secrets that had been buried for years. Mickey Stine's lawyers were determined to uncover the truth. They argued that their client had been pushed to the brink by a combination of mental illness and the pressure of the deposition. They pointed to Stine's erratic behavior in the days leading up to the shooting. His paranoia, his sleepless nights, his fear for his family. But the prosecution wasn't convinced. They believed that Stine had acted out of anger and revenge, not insanity. As the trial began, the courtroom was packed with spectators eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution called their first witness, Clayton Stamper, a Kentucky State Police investigator who had interviewed Stine after the shooting. Stamper testified that Stine had been calm but paranoid during the interrogation. "He kept saying, 'Treat me fair,'" Stamper recalled. He was afraid for his family, but he wouldn't say why. The defense, however, had a different story to tell. They called a series of witnesses who described Stine's mental state in the days leading up to the shooting. One witness, a close friend of Stines, testified that he had never seen Stine so distraught. "He was a mess," the friend said. "He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. He kept saying that his family was in danger, but he wouldn't say who was threatening them." Another witness, a psychiatrist hired by the defense, testified that Stine had been suffering from extreme emotional disturbance at the time of the shooting. "He was in a state of panic," the psychiatrist explained. "He believed that his family was in imminent danger, and he felt that he had no other choice but to act." But the prosecution wasn't buying it. They argued that Stine's actions were calculated, not impulsive. They pointed to the fact that he had brought a gun to the courthouse that day, suggesting that he had planned the shooting in advance. They also questioned the credibility of the defense's witnesses, arguing that their testimony was biased in favor of Stine. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the trial continued. The prosecution called Sabrina Atkins to the stand, hoping to use her testimony to prove that Stine had a motive for the shooting. Atkins repeated her allegations about the video she had seen, describing in detail the sexual acts that had taken place in Judge Mullins' chambers. She also testified that Stine had been present during some of these incidents, suggesting that he had been complicit in the corruption. But the defense was quick to counter. They argued that Atkins' testimony was unreliable, pointing out that she had a criminal record and a history of making false accusations. They also questioned why the video she described had never been found, suggesting that it might not exist at all. As the trial progressed, the focus shifted to the events of September 19th. The prosecution played the surveillance footage for the jury, highlighting the moments leading up to the shooting. They pointed to Stine's calm demeanor as he pulled the trigger, arguing that it was evidence of premeditation. But the defense argued that the footage didn't tell the whole story. They claimed that Stine had been provoked by something Mullins said, something that pushed him over the edge. The defense also called attention to the fact that the surveillance camera in Mullins' chambers had been installed after the allegations against Ben Fields came to light. They suggested that the camera had been put in place to cover up the corruption, not to prevent it. "This was a courthouse with secrets," one of Stine's lawyers argued. "And Mickey Stine was caught in the middle of it." As the trial neared its conclusion, the jury was left with a difficult decision. Was Mickey Stine a man pushed to the brink by mental illness and fear for his family? Or was he a cold-blooded killer who had acted out of anger and revenge? The answer would determine not just Stine's fate, but the fate of a community still reeling from the scandal. The courtroom was tense as the jury filed back in, their faces unreadable. After days of deliberation, they had reached a verdict. Mickey Stine sat at the defense table, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. His lawyers had fought tirelessly to prove that he was not in his right mind when he shot Judge Kevin Mullins. But would the jury believe them? The judge called for order as the foreperson stood to deliver the verdict. On the charge of murder in the first degree, the foreperson began, "We find the defendant, Mickey Stine, not guilty by reason of insanity." Gasps filled the room. Stine's family wept with relief, while Mullins' loved ones sat in stunned silence. The verdict was controversial, to say the least. Many believed that Stine had gotten away with murder, while others felt that justice had been served. But the story didn't end there. In the weeks following the trial, new details emerged about the corruption scandal that had rocked Letcher County. Investigators finally uncovered the video Sabrina Atkins had described, the one that allegedly showed Judge Mullins engaging in sexual acts with a woman in his chambers. The video was damning, not just for Mullins, but for others in positions of power who had been involved in the scandal. The fallout was swift. Ben Fields, the deputy who had been accused of coercing Atkins into sex, was sentenced to prison. Other officials were forced to resign, and the courthouse underwent a complete overhaul to prevent future abuses of power. But for Mickey Stine, the victory was bittersweet. Although he had been found not guilty by reason of insanity, Stine was ordered to undergo psychiatric treatment. He was sent to a secure facility, where he would remain until doctors determined that he was no longer a danger to himself or others. His lawyers argued that he had been a victim of the corruption as much as anyone else, but the public remained divided. Stine's family visited him regularly, bringing news from the outside world. They told him about the changes that had taken place in Letcher County, and how the community was slowly healing. But Stine's mind was still haunted by the events of that fateful day. He often wondered if he could have done something differently, if he could have found another way to protect his family. As the months turned into years, Stine's condition improved. He began to open up to his doctors about the paranoia and fear that had consumed him in the days leading up to the shooting. He spoke of the pressure he had felt as the county sheriff, and the weight of the secrets he had uncovered. Slowly but surely, he started to come to terms with what he had done. But the scars remained, both for Stine and for the community he had once served. The scandal had exposed a dark underbelly of corruption, one that would take years to fully heal. And while the verdict had brought closure for some, it had left others with more questions than answers. Years after the trial, the small town of Letcher County, Kentucky, still bore the scars of the scandal that had torn it apart. The courthouse, once a symbol of justice and order, had become a reminder of the corruption that had festered within its walls. But amidst the pain and loss, there were signs of healing and lessons learned. Mickey Stine remained in the psychiatric facility, his condition steadily improving. His doctors reported that he had made significant progress, though they cautioned that his recovery would be a long and difficult journey. Stine's family continued to visit him, offering their unwavering support. They often brought photos of his daughter, who had grown into a bright and resilient young woman. Stine clung to these moments, finding solace in the love of his family. Meanwhile, the community worked to rebuild its trust in the justice system. New policies were put in place to ensure transparency and accountability, and the courthouse underwent a complete overhaul. The surveillance cameras that had once been used to cover up corruption were now a tool for preventing it. The scandal had been a wake-up call, forcing the town to confront its flaws and strive for a better future. But not everyone was ready to move on. Judge Kevin Mullins' family continued to grieve his loss, struggling to reconcile the man they had loved with the allegations that had surfaced after his death. They refused to believe that he had been involved in the scandal, insisting that he had been a victim of false accusations. For them, the verdict had been a bitter pill to swallow, and they vowed to keep his memory alive. As for Sabrina Atkins, she became an unlikely advocate for victims of abuse and corruption. Her testimony had been instrumental in exposing the scandal, and she used her newfound platform to push for change. She spoke at conferences and rallies, sharing her story and calling for greater protections for those who dared to speak out against injustice. Though her past was far from perfect, she had found a sense of purpose in the aftermath of the trial. The case of Mickey Stine and Judge Kevin Mullins became a cautionary tale, one that was studied in law schools and discussed in legal circles. It raised important questions about mental health, corruption, and the limits of the justice system. It also served as a reminder of the human cost of power and greed, and the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. As the years passed, the town of Letcher County began to heal. The courthouse, once a symbol of shame, became a beacon of hope, a place where justice could be served without fear or favor. The scandal had left its mark, but it had also sparked a movement for change, one that would ensure that such a tragedy would never happen again. And so, the story of Mickey Stine and Judge Kevin Mullins comes to an end. It's a story of betrayal, corruption, and the fragile nature of the human mind. But it's also a story of resilience, redemption, and the power of truth to bring about change. If you've been following this gripping tale, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this one. Thank you for being a part of our journey, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious and stay safe.